Another big weekend awaits in the EFL Championship as we return for match week 34 being played between Friday and Monday across 4 days this weekend. All 24 teams are in action, 12 matches, and we will preview and predict the score in all of them. As always, I'll encourage you to do exactly the same in the comments below. Huge games at the top and bottom. And if you beat my overall score, you'll get a shout out in the next recap as we return to Wednesday next week and the usual slot. But we've also got 2 midweek fixtures on Tuesday, and we'll be back on Sunday evening to have a look at those. So make sure you come and check that out. But for now, before we go and get ahead to match week 34, let's have a quick recap of both match week 33 and the 2 midweek fixtures. And there's only one story to tell. It is the return of the Championship's favourite scoreline, and it's also a new record for the channel. My best ever score in Championship predictions. I managed to get 50% of the available points. 5 perfect scores, 18 points in total. It is without doubt my best ever performance. And most importantly, all 3 of my Championship's favourite scoreline predictions were correct. Cardiff, Bristol City, Hull, Norwich and Millwall, West Brom. And I also got perfect scores for the 0-0 with Burnley predictably. And of course for the very late win for Leeds United on Monday. That gave me 18 points. And although no one beat me, there was one person who got within 8 points. And you deserve a shout out because Marco on 15 with a very strong effort. Then in midweek, it was Championship's favourite scorelines galore. I predicted one of the 2 as Preston drew 1-1 with Millwall. And 4 of you managed to get 3 points level with me again. Marco, one of those, well done to you. A very solid week all round. But also Nigel, Chris and Mello, who got 1 Championship's favourite scoreline out of 2 to pick up 3 points in midweek as well. With that out of the way though, we move on to match week 34. And rather boldly, after a few weeks without and then a big return last weekend, I've only gone for one 1-1 draw this weekend. Whether or not that will come back to bite me, we'll wait and find out. But for now, we go on to the first of 2 games on Friday night. And this one is the Sky Sports Plus game. It's Bristol City versus Middlesbrough. 2 sides in the battle for the playoffs, both within 4 points just outside. A little bit of pressure starting to build on Michael Carrick. Now 5 defeats in 6, 4 in a row. And okay, they played 2 of the top 4 in that time as well. But at home to Watford last weekend, a side that are pretty dismal on the road, that was a really surprising result. We've mentioned it that they've had these spells this year where they just can't put the ball in the net. And again, they had enough chances to score. It was a pretty even game. It wasn't their best performance, but it's another one of those that you look at and you go, they probably shouldn't have lost that and somehow did. So definitely concerns on that front for Middlesbrough. They are starting to concede quite heavily as well. For Bristol City, a 1-1 draw at Cardiff, perhaps a little frustrating, but pretty much what we called. Again, the old Bristol City habit of conceding a late goal in the 90th minute, which of course has cost them 2 points and what would have been a chance to be level on points with the playoffs going into this weekend. It wasn't their best performance, albeit they had a couple of very good chances, but overall they offered Cardiff a fair share of the game, and a 1-1 draw on the balance of play probably wasn't unfair. But bar that Swansea game at home, Bristol City have been very consistent in recent weeks. They're not conceding too many goals, albeit that late one will be a concern. Neither of these sides are perfect defensively. Both of them have got goals in them, but whether it's consistent, I don't know. There's a strong argument for the Championship's favourite scoreline here, but I'm going to go for a little bit more of a thrilling draw, and I'm going to go for 2 goals apiece between Bristol City and Borough. The second game on Friday night is Burnley versus Sheffield Wednesday. Now, do we go for Burnley to finally concede a goal? Because it was yet another clean sheet away at Preston, as we correctly predicted a 0-0 draw. 11 clean sheets in a row is remarkable. But again, no attacking threat. Preston had 1 good opportunity in the game. Burnley had a couple of shots on target, 1 good chance. But they just don't look much of a spark at the minute. And I know that may change as the likes of Marcus Edwards come into the starting 11 and build up fitness to January signing. But they just do seem to be missing a bit going forward. And that's going to cost them because the clean sheets are great, but it's 3 of their last 6 they've not scored in now. Away at Pompey and Preston, with the greatest of respect, they're bottom half teams. And if you want to be getting promoted automatically, you've got to be winning a fair share of those matches and have not been able to do so. So the question comes whether they can score and break down Sheffield Wednesday, who aren't the best side defensively. They've thrown in a couple of away clean sheets in the recent month or so against QPR and Swansea. But then they've had a couple of poor days against West Brom on the road and also against Coventry, where in both of those games they conceded very late goals. Now, the Sheffield Wednesday v Coventry game was a bit of a kicker because they absolutely battered Coventry for the majority of the game. Probably should have been out of sight. Had 2 or 3 great opportunities to kill the game off. Didn't do so. And when you leave it level at 1-1 going into stoppage time and you are pushing for the winner, you're always going to leave yourself open at the back. And Sheffield Wednesday are not the most robust defensively. And unfortunately, they were caught out as a result of it. For this game, I'm going to bank on Burnley to score just because Sheffield Wednesday are not a side you associate with grinding out a result. So I'm going to go, despite them having a good season, to continue to concede more. They're at 50 already for the year. Burnley are only at 9. I'm going to go for them to win by 1-0. As we move on to the first of 3 early kickoffs on Saturday, and it is John Eustace's derby, who are at home to Millwall with Alex Neil, of course. Alex Neil got a draw against his former club in midweek as Millwall have 2 successive 1-1 draws, which we predicted both of this time around. At Preston, it was an interesting game, wasn't it? Scored just before the break, got themselves into a good position, came out and undid all the work at the start of the second half. There's no doubting they were second best in that game, but they'll be happy enough on the road to have picked up a point. And to be fair, against West Bromwich Albion, it was a better performance at home. Certainly Millwall having more of the ball and more of the attacks than we've seen in recent times and under previous managers, but not quite got that cutting edge. But having lost 5-1 to Plymouth shockingly the midweek before, and being one of those sides that had a lot of midweek fixtures to catch up on, I don't think they'll be too upset about 2 points there. And let's be honest, they're still only 6 points off the playoffs. You never know. As Derby County got off to a little bit of a disaster start under John Eustace. We mentioned that his away form has not been great at most championship clubs. And unfortunately, it was pretty woeful in his first game in charge here. A 4-0 defeat at QPR. A pretty wretched performance from start to finish. QPR, yes, nearly everything they hit went in, but Derby created next to nothing. Had a bit more of the ball, but didn't really do anything with it. And in the end, it was a really worrying day for them. But this is where they're going to be judged. This is the bread and butter because Derby have struggled to score goals all season. They've only scored, 2 in their last 6 matches. They've gone on this long winless run. And this has got to be the time they end it. They had the 0-0 at home to Oxford under interim management. This is the sort of game when you're trying to get out of trouble, as Derby are at the minute, that you've got to target because it's a bottom half team at home and you're not going to get that many more times this year. I'm going to go for Derby to get a response here. First home game for Eustace, his first full week working with a team. I'm sure a raucous atmosphere at Pride Park. I'm going to go for Derby by 2-1 and bank on them to score more than 1 for once. The second early kickoff is another huge game at the bottom, but this time for both teams as Plymouth Argyle face Cardiff City. 2 sides that come off a 1-1 draw again. Plymouth snuck one away at Luton in midweek. However, you could argue they should have won the game because they scored a perfectly good goal in the first half that was ruled out for offside. Other than that and the goal they scored, they offered no attacking threat. It was very clear when they went 1-0 up that they tried to hold on for the game. But thankfully for them, Luton don't know how to take chances, so they managed to get themselves a point, and it's a pretty useful one away from home, I would suggest as well. For Cardiff, a 1-1 draw against Bristol City, a late goal, really important one as well. Cardiff actually played pretty well in this game, had a few chances, still a little bit lapsed defensively. We've mentioned that for a long time with them, but given the fact they conceded 7-3 and 2 in their 3 games previous in all competitions, to only let in 1 will probably be a bit of relief, albeit it could have been more. It does make this game hard to predict because Plymouth have produced a couple of great home performances recently. I mean, they won 3 in a row against West Brom, Liverpool and Millwall, and I don't think anyone in the world would have seen that coming. Whereas away from home, they've struggled a little more. Cardiff have been pretty rotten defensively on the road. Their 3 games against Pompey, Stoke and Leeds, they conceded goals for fun, even letting 2 at Millwall prior to that as well. And they're a side that don't often score many. So I do fancy if Plymouth are going to have a win, it might be a game like this at home. It's a chance for them to come out the relegation zones, to go level on points with Cardiff. And you know what? I think they might do it. I'm going to go for a Plymouth win. I think they've looked better tactically in recent weeks under Miron Muslic. And I'm going to go for them to get the result with a 3-1 win at home to Cardiff and their poor defensive run to continue. And the final early kickoff features another side in that relegation battle, but this time against a side who were heartbroken at the top on Monday night. It is Sunderland versus Hull City. We all saw what happened to Sunderland on Monday. A heartbreaking late finish at Leeds United. 1-0 up with 15 to go, ended up losing it in the 95th minute. And what could have been a real chance to close the gap on the top 2 ends up maybe ending their automatic promotion chances if they can't go on a perfect run now. I mean, they were second best for most of the game, but they looked ruthless and clinical on the counter. Exactly what you expect from Sunderland. You know that Leeds are going to hem most teams in this year. You know that they're going to be the dominant force at home. But to have that threat on the counter and really worry them is something that a lot of teams can't do. So Sunderland do have to take some heart from that. But defensively, we've mentioned it for a while. They're just not quite the same as those other sides at the top. They've conceded 30 goals, none of the others more than 23, and they've conceded 2 in 4 of their last 5 games. The only game they didn't was against Luton Town, who are right at the bottom of the table. For Hull City, a draw probably not enough at home to Norwich City. Yes, it ended the run of largely defeats, but if we take out that Sheffield United win, which was a brilliant performance, they've been incredibly consistently poor apart from that. The Norwich game was a weird one. I would say Norwich edged the clear chances, but Hull City did create enough. It was an even enough game, but they just haven't got that attacking intent. And we've mentioned it before, the managerial changes are bizarre. They're in a far worse position than they were under Liam Rossini, but they did get another point and it keeps them just above the dotted line. As it is, Sunderland, yes, I know they had the tool draw against Plymouth, but generally, when they've played the bottom sides like Luton and Derby, they've kept clean sheets. They normally are a good value for a goal, and Hull aren't the best at the back. I know they could shock you like they did against Sheffield United, but I don't think they will this time. I'm going for Sunderland to win this one pretty comfortably by 2-0. As we move on to the 3 p.m. kickoffs and a side that had late jubilation last week, it is Coventry City versus Preston North End. Coventry will want to take advantage of the momentum from the late winner against Sheffield Wednesday in a game in which they were second best, by the way. Sheffield Wednesday dominated, they hung on for dear life, and then they nicked one when Sheffield Wednesday were chasing the game at the end. It's a classic away day win. You've got to give Frank Lampard credit. Coventry are right up there, 7th place, 1 point off the playoffs, and 5 wins out of 6. They're in very good form. For Preston, played an extra game, of course, because of the midweek fixtures, but they're doing okay. A 0-0 draw against Burnley, backed up with a 1-1 draw against Millwall. Yes, a frustrating result in that last game, but a good performance again. And I've mentioned it a few times under Paul Heckingbottom now. Preston just haven't quite got enough firepower. They're looking good, and as I've said before, with a good window or two back in Paul Heckingbottom, they could be a side pushing for the playoffs in a longer term. For me, this game has to be a Coventry win. I think it will be tight. Preston have only let in 1 goal in their last 4 matches in all competitions. But Coventry, bar the Ipswich Cup tie, have been pretty solid as well. I'm going to go for them to edge this game. Maybe another late winner, who knows. I was tempted to go for 1-0, but we're going for goals this weekend. I'm going for 2-1 Coventry. As we move into the second half and the battle of mid-table, it is Norwich City versus Stoke City. Stoke got a much-needed win at home to Swansea City. Ended up being the end of Luke Williams, which we'll talk about soon. But Lewis Baker scoring from his own half, but a really decent performance from Stoke and a much-needed victory. Defensively, they were far more robust. You know Swansea are going to have a lot of the ball, but they hit them on the counter, created the best chances. And while they didn't create bundles, Stoke, they did enough. And you started to see the patterns of the Mark Robins counter-attack that became so infamous with his Coventry team. So that moves them 6 points away from the bottom 3 and looking towards mid-table instead. But this time they go and visit a Norwich City side that are just a little bit patchy and inconsistent. They've got Josh Sargent back and in form. Of course, they've got Borja Signs back from his ban now, which does make a little bit of a difference. But you do ask the question, are Norwich going to be consistent enough or have enough firepower for the top 6? It's going to be a very difficult ask at the moment. And this is going to be an interesting game. There's a lot of people who go for the Championship's favourite scoreline here. Norwich have produced some really good home performances, but as we saw against Preston, they've got a clanger in them as well. I've just got a feeling we're starting to see some signs from Mark Robins' team. I know they were poor at Bristol City, but in a cup against Cardiff, against Hull in the league and against Swansea, they're starting to create those opportunities now. They're starting to look a threat on the counter-attack. They're coming up against another side in Norwich who like to keep the ball, who like to play progressive and in the opposition's half. So I wonder if they'll be able to hit them again. I'm going for my shock of the weekend here. I'm going to go for Stoke to win at Norwich by 2-1. As we move on to a game that is almost becoming another mid-table battle, and Portsmouth will be delighted about that as they host QPR. Back-to-back wins for Pompey as they beat Cardiff and Oxford in 2 crucial games. Really good away win as well at Oxford United. A goal early and at the end of the second half. To be fair to them, they were the better side in front of goal. Oxford had chances, and we say this about Pompey. They're not just going to keep clean sheets for fun, and I know they got one in the end in this game. but they gave up so many good opportunities. They always do. But they found the firepower. They're playing to their strengths going forward, and they're outscoring the opposition, which is all you can really ask. We know that they're going to need to improve their defence for next season, but at the moment, they're scoring more goals than anyone else in that bottom half, and that's going to be enough to keep them up. They're the first team down there to pass 40 goals for the year, and they're doing a really good job. So John Massinio takes a lot of credit for that. Another team that suddenly find themselves in amongst the goals are QPR. They had one of those days where everything just went in. They beat Derby County by 4-0. It was a really decent performance. I know they didn't create hundreds of opportunities, but they were by far the better team. They deserved to win the game. Maybe 4 is not a fair reflection on it, but when you've got quality like Ilias Chair in the team, and he has one of those nights, you've always got an opportunity. So QPR, I've said it for a long time, I think they're just a goal scorer away from a playoff push. I'm going to go for my one and only Championship's favourite scoreline here. I think QPR will present a different type of problem for Pompey. We know they're going to give up chances, but QPR aren't always the most ruthless in front of goal. They've only scored 1 in their last 2 away games. They struggle to break down Millwall regularly. So I'm going to go for Portsmouth to be frustrated a little, but still to pick up another valuable point with a 1-1 draw. And the penultimate game on Saturday is currently, as I'm recording this, managerless Swansea City against, currently as I'm recording this, managerless Blackburn Rovers. Yes, it could be the managerless derby. Two sides that lost their managers in different circumstances. Blackburn in the playoffs, but John Eustace took the plunge to go down to Derby in the relegation zone. But it's not affected their form, has it? A 2-0 win away at West Brom, backed up with a 2-0 win at home to Plymouth. I thought it might be the type of game that tripped them up slightly, but in the end, I have to say it was a dominant performance. It was a really good, efficient home display. Created chances, probably should have scored more. Will be disappointed with the manner of the chances they gave up on the counter at times, but to be honest with you, Blackburn all season have been really impressive, and they've got so much firepower on the counter going forward, and they deserve to win the game very comfortably. For Swansea, the end of Luke Williams at the end of a very poor run. We mentioned that win at Bristol City, which sort of stemmed the tide, but otherwise they've been awful. And it's the fact that they're not scoring goals, they're conceding bucket loads, and that didn't change against Stoke. A 3-1 defeat. They gave up great chances. Yes, they got caught chasing it at the end, but to be honest with you, they never looked like winning the game. They had loads of the ball and offered no threat at all with it. So I'm not surprised that Luke Williams has gone. Swansea are the one side from that mid-table pack that are just drifting towards the relegation battle. They're going to have to be very careful to pick up points soon. On this occasion, I know Blackburn aren't the best away from home, but Swansea, they don't look like scoring at the minute. I'm not sure Blackburn will score as many because I think Swansea will set up slightly differently this week under interim management. But I'm going to go for the visitors to win the managerless derby by 1-0, albeit both of them could have someone in charge by the time this episode comes out. And the final game on Saturday is Tony Mowbray's West Brom against Oxford United, as Gary Rowett's just starting to have the end of the honeymoon period. His 5 without a victory, albeit 3 of those were draws, but 4 of them without scoring. And probably of most concern to him is the fact that they didn't score against Portsmouth, because while it was a pretty poor defensive display and they deserved to concede a couple of goals, they had so many good chances. The fact they only hit the target once when having officially 3 clear-cut chances, a couple that were really poor misses. They dominated the ball. They did have a bit of the territory, but you can't afford to miss chances like that at the higher level. They played a little differently like they did at home to Luton, where they went a bit more aggressive against those teams in the bottom half. Unfortunately for them, it didn't pan out. I would expect them to revert to a more defensive away display as they did against Burnley, as they did against Derby and Stoke every game on the road recently, because West Brom had a bit of a stuttering start under Tony Mowbray. The big win against Pompey, the late win against Sheffield Wednesday, but frustration against Plymouth, against Blackburn, and in midweek against Millwall, where, to be fair to them, they did produce a half-decent performance, but Millwall had more of the ball, which was probably the biggest shock. Tony Mowbray's side not able to cause much damage on the counter-attack, and that's something that we would have expected to see. We've mentioned that West Brom haven't got the biggest goal threat of those top sides, but the fact that they gave up that many chances to Millwall would definitely be a concern from a discipline point of view. They cling on in the top 6 for now, and in this one, I think they will bounce back with a win. A bit off-brand for West Brom this season. I'm going to go for 3-0. As we move on to Sunday and a petrifying M1 derby, it is Watford versus Luton Town. Watford back in form with a big 1-0 win away at Middlesbrough. Moussa Sissoko, a player that I've always been a big fan of, so It's a bit of a conflicting one for me, that. But while Michael Carrick's under pressure at Borough, Watford played really well. It was a good performance. It was a decent attacking display as well. And to keep a clean sheet, albeit they still gave up a few chances, would definitely be a relief for Tom Cleverley. He's a man that's been under pressure, and for the life of me, I know they've had a poor run at times, but I don't understand why. They've played against top teams when they've been in this run. They lost narrowly away at Coventry, who were 7th. They got battered by Leeds, who were beating everyone. And they drew away at Sunderland, who are a top team. Yes, they had a couple of frustrations at home to Preston and Norwich, but generally, they've had a really good year. They're 3 points off the playoffs. And I know they've had a slightly worse second third of the season, but I'm saying it even as a Luton fan. I think Watford will be worse off if they sack Tom Cleverley. But hopefully that talk's gone quiet for them for now. Albeit Luton could change that if they pick up a win at the weekend. The reverse derby was Luton's best performance of the season. It's been a bit dismal since then. I will say the last 2 home games against Sheffield United and Plymouth have been far better performances. Luton had lots of opportunities against Sheffield United, didn't take them. 3 clear-cut chances against Plymouth, didn't take them. But they look so susceptible defensively. The offside line against Sheffield United for the goal was non-existent to awful, whichever one you want to use. Against Plymouth, they conceded a perfectly good goal, which the linesman saved them from, and again gave up a poor goal from a cross into the box with a defender off the pitch for momentarily. It's just looking a bit of a flat, frustrating year, and I'm starting to really worry about it. Luton haven't won in 12 away games. The last one was, away in Millwall in September. That's their only away win of the year in the league. And I don't see that changing this weekend. I hate to say it because obviously we want a competitive derby. We want a good game. I think Watford will win this comfortably. I have to go with my head over heart here and say 2-0 to the home side. I do desperately hope I'm wrong though. As we move on to Monday night and a huge battle of the top 2, a Yorkshire derby between Sheffield United and Leeds United. Are they both going to be promoted this year? Sheffield United make it 4 wins in a row. Not the best performance in a 1-0 win against Luton, it must be said. They were battered in the first half and it could have been out of sight the other way. They're doing what great sides do when they get promoted. They're nicking 1-0 wins when they're not playing well. They're nicking 2-1 victories in games where they've been awful at home. The Pompey game, the Luton game, the Derby game, the Swansea game. They weren't great in any of them, but they found a way to win. The only off day was the Hull City match at home, but if we go back to the reverse fixture against Leeds, they were played off the park. Leeds are in pretty good form themselves. I know the cup game was poor, but a 2-1 win against Sunderland, kept going to the end, got a big 95th minute winner. Yes, they probably had the better of the game. They gave up a few chances on the counter-attack. They were susceptible to it. But Leeds United at home are something else. They're so strong. They can just pen teams in a half for, 30, 40 minutes at a time. No other team in the league can do that. Certainly not do it consistently. But this is one of the few games that might be difficult for them. As I mentioned, I've not been impressed with the way that Sheffield United have played recently, but they seem to find a way to get results. On this occasion, though, I think Leeds might just have too much. They've got so much firepower going forward. Sheffield United are still without some key players, in fairness. So I'm going to go for Leeds to extend their gap at the top narrowly by 2-1 against Sheffield United. But as it stands, I still think both sides have got a great chance of being the top 2. So with that out of the way, let's have a quick recap of what I've gone for this weekend. And due to the battle of the top 2, I've gone for Burnley and Sunderland to catch ground on Sheffield United. If both of those wins, they could narrow the gap by 3 points if my predictions are right. At the bottom end of the table, I've gone for Luton to lose again. I've gone for Plymouth to be the big winners with a victory at home. And I've also gone for John Eustace to win his first home game in charge. Maybe putting the likes of Hull City and Cardiff in a bit of trouble at the end of this weekend. Those are just my predictions for match week 34 though. Do you agree or disagree with me? Let me know in the comments below. Can one of you beat me this weekend? Surely I'm not going to have the same luck again. If you want to stay up to date and find out, then please do put a thumbs up on the video, subscribe and turn that notification bell on. We'll be back on Sunday night to look ahead to 2 big midweek fixtures on Tuesday night, one at the bottom and one in the playoff race. And we're also going to have manager specials from Swansea and Blackburn as and when they appoint their new managers. Otherwise, we will be back next Wednesday for the full preview of match week 35. And if you beat or match my overall score this week, you'll get a shout out at the start of that video. Enjoy the 4-day festival of Championship football, and I'll see you again here on Sunday to look ahead to 2 big midweek games.